A black woman had her head shaved inside a federal courtroom, in front of witnesses, before she even spoke a word. But that was just the surface, because minutes later, the man who humiliated her realized she was the one who had the power to sentence him, and this time, she wasn't staying silent. Are you ready for the truth that just might shake the system? Tell us, where are you watching from, and what time is it on your side? Drop it in the comments, because what's coming next is not your average story. She chose to park far from the courthouse, not out of fear, but to remind herself of the ground she walked on. Baton Rouge wasn't her city, not anymore. It had been once, long ago, when she was still teaching civil procedure to kids who didn't believe the law would ever bend in their favor. Now it was a battlefield with a marble facade, and she was walking straight into its heart. Ariana Bellamy adjusted the collar of her navy blazer as she neared the steps of the civil courthouse. The air was thick, humid, not from weather, but from memory. This building had seen too much and forgotten even more. It remembered screams, petitions, quiet settlements, and ugly silences. And yet, like all institutions designed to endure, it stood unshaken, waiting to grind through another day. She didn't wear her robe, never had outside the courtroom. Not because she lacked pride in the title, but because robes drew eyes and sometimes power works better in silence. Today wasn't about being seen, it was about seeing everything. Ariana's heels met the tiled floor just inside the atrium with a muted click. Deliberate, composed. Her silver hair, twisted tight into a bun, was like a crown no one had earned the right to touch. She carried a single leather portfolio, thin and worn from use, but pristine in posture. She passed two junior clerks who barely glanced up. Good, that was the point. She was here incognito, assigned temporarily to oversee a highly sensitive review of civil misconduct cases. Judges didn't like outsiders. Outsiders with oversight, even less. Then came the checkpoint. There were two lines, one for staff, one for visitors. She moved to the staff lane. A younger officer waved her forward, but before she could pass, a voice stopped her like a door slamming shut. Hold up. She turned. He stood solid, arms crossed over a too-tight uniform shirt, bald head gleaming under harsh ceiling lights. Late 50s, broad-chested, eyes like rusted nails, sharp, and dangerous if stepped on wrong. Deputy Logan Merrick. He looked her up and down slowly, as if trying to place her, or reduce her. No visible ID. What's your business here, ma'am? His ma'am didn't carry respect. It carried a warning. My identification is registered, Ariana said evenly, reaching into her blazer. I'm expected. He didn't take the badge when she offered it. Didn't even glance down. Step out of line, he said. We've had some incidents lately. Extra screening protocol. Ariana narrowed her eyes slightly. There are no such DHS guidelines for personnel with federal clearance. There are today, Merrick replied, especially for people who walk in here dressed like they run the place. She could have corrected him, could have summoned Clerk Weller, who would have shut this down in seconds. But something in her spine told her not to. Not yet. Very well, she said, voice flat. He jerked his head. This way. He led her down a short hallway to a side room marked Screening Restricted. The hallway dimmed. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, uneven and sterile. Inside the room, one steel chair, a metal table, a mobile cart with a body scanner, and nothing else. No window, no camera, no oversight. He closed the door behind them. Have a seat. Ariana remained standing. Would you mind explaining what part of this complies with any federal screening standard? Merrick peeled off a pair of gloves from his belt. Sometimes it's less about compliance, more about cooperation. That sounds dangerously vague. People like you, he said, voice dropping into something colder, come in here thinking you're above scrutiny. Fancy clothes, that smug stare, but not today. She sat, not because he asked, but because standing would have given him something to push against. He circled behind her like a predator inspecting prey. Then, almost casually, he reached for the side cart and picked up a pair of clippers. Any metal pins in that hair? Ariana didn't move. Excuse me? Hair checks. Part of the new body scan clearance, he said, flicking the switch. The buzz of the clippers screamed in the closed space. She didn't flinch. You know, he continued, stepping closer, back in the day, people knew better than to test courthouse security. Now, they walk in thinking they're owed something. His hand grazed the top of her bun. You touch me, she said quietly, and you'll find out exactly what you're not owed. He paused. A moment of decision hung in the air, long enough to pretend he might reconsider. But ego never backs down gently. He brought the clippers to her scalp. The first coil fell to the floor like a silver thread cut from something ancient. Then another, then another. No violence in the gesture, just cold precision. Ariana said nothing. Her eyes remained forward. Her hands gripped the leather handles of her bag so tightly her knuckles paled. But she did not blink. When it was done, Merrick stepped back, brushing stray hairs from his gloves. Much better, he muttered. Now you look like someone who knows their place. She stood, not slowly, not defiantly, just upright. And without a word, she walked back toward the courtroom, bare scalp gleaming under overhead lights, each step quiet, but louder than anything he'd ever said. The hallway outside the screening room was too quiet, as if it had just witnessed something shameful and didn't know how to speak of it. Ariana walked it alone. The silence didn't follow her. It recoiled from her, as if afraid of what she might now become. No one stopped her. No one asked questions, not the guard at the double doors, not the junior clerk shuffling papers on her way to the elevator. They glanced at her scalp, then looked away just as fast. Guilt, cowardice, complicity. It was hard to tell which. She reached the end of the corridor and turned sharply into the clerk's office. Clerk Weller, a man of 70 with round glasses and nerves like glass, blinked when he saw her. Judge Bellamy? He asked, voice pinched. We didn't expect you until... I'll be taking the bench for the 9-hour civil docket, she said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. He stared. His eyes flickered up toward her bare head, then snapped back down. Yes, of course, I'll notify the bailiff. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. In the judge's chambers, she moved methodically, hung her blazer, unclasped her bag, slipped the black robe from its hanger, and let it fall over her shoulders. The fabric was cool, heavy, familiar. She took a slow breath in front of the mirror, studied the lines of her face, and didn't flinch. It was 8:57 when she stepped through the chamber door into the courtroom. The gallery was half full, mostly attorneys, some plaintiffs, a few curious onlookers. The room buzzed with the kind of low hum that precedes a long day of slow justice. But when Ariana entered, the air shifted. The buzz died. All eyes turned. Someone dropped a pen. She walked up the steps to the bench, stood behind it, and looked out. Her scalp shone under the soft dome lights, bare and unforgiving. But it wasn't a symbol of weakness. It was proof. Proof that power, even when stripped, can still rise. She tapped the gavel once. Court is now in session. Gasps were swallowed in throats. Across the room at the defense table, Logan Merrick stood in uniform, clipboard in hand. The same hand that had held the clippers. The same smirk he wore that morning was now gone. His jaw slackened. His eyes didn't blink. Deputy Merrick, she said calmly, please approach the bench. He didn't move. Ariana tilted her head just slightly. Is there a problem? He blinked, then stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor, he mumbled. Her voice dropped a register. Closer. He obeyed. Now he stood just feet from her, close enough to see the faint red irritation across her scalp, close enough to realize what he had done was no longer hidden in the back hallway, but laid bare beneath the lights of justice. Deputy, she said, you performed a secondary screening this morning, did you not? He opened his mouth, closed it. Yes, ma'am, he said finally. And during this screening, did you employ any physical search measures? He shifted. It was part of a protocol I believed was required. Did you or did you not touch me without consent? Silence, then, yes, ma'am. She nodded once, slowly. Noted. You may return to your post, for now. Merrick turned like a man half awake, barely understanding how the floor had disappeared beneath him. He returned to his place by the gallery wall, the clipboard now trembling slightly in his grip. Ariana opened her docket book. Case number 21422C, Briggs v. Baton Rouge Civil Authority. Plaintiff alleges physical assault by law enforcement during a permitted demonstration. The plaintiff's attorney stood. Your Honor, Mr. Malcolm Hensley is present and ready to testify. A man in his 40s stepped forward. His salt and pepper beard was trimmed, but his eyes were heavy. He limped slightly as he approached the stand. His hands, thick and scarred from warehouse labor, gripped the edge of the railing. "Raise your right hand," the clerk said. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." He sat. "Mr. Hensley," Ariana said, "please describe what happened to your son during the protest last year." He cleared his throat. "My boy, he was 17, smart, wanted to be a teacher. He was out there with his friends holding a sign. 'Stop killing us.' That's all it said. That's all." His voice cracked. He wasn't yelling, wasn't fighting. But then this officer, he glanced at the defense table. "He tackled my son, slammed him face down, and he put his knee right here." Hensley touched his throat. "Right on his windpipe." Ariana leaned forward slightly. "Did your son survive?" "Barely," Hensley said. "He hasn't spoken above a whisper since." Ariana's fingers tapped once on her bench. She turned to the defense attorney. "Lieutenant Bryce Denham was on the scene, was he not?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Bring him forward." A tall, tired-looking officer took the stand. Ariana's eyes stayed locked on his. "Lieutenant," she said, "do you consider a crushed trachea a minor injury?" He hesitated. "No, ma'am, of course not." Then why did your official report categorize the incident as minor force with minimal harm?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "Answer." He looked around as if someone might save him. No one did. I was told to use that language." "By whom?" "Command chain." Ariana's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "Then this court will require full disclosure of all internal communications related to that report. Today." "Yes, Your Honor." Ariana turned her attention back to the room. People were leaning in now. No one whispered. No one moved. For the first time that morning, the courthouse didn't feel like a monument to silence. It felt like justice had stirred. The courtroom released a slow, collective breath as the witness stepped down. Malcolm Hensley gave a small nod before limping back to his seat, leaving behind the words that had just cracked open the first layer of something rotten and long buried. But Ariana Bellamy didn't move. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the bench, her fingertips brushing against the polished wood as though listening to the echoes it had absorbed over the years. Pleas, lies, confessions, verdicts. She did not speak. The gavel lay untouched. Instead, she stood. For a moment, the room held still. Then she stepped down. The walk from the bench wasn't far, just a dozen paces to the gallery floor. But each step felt like it peeled away a layer of tradition, of performance, of distance. She did not remove her robe yet. She didn't need to. People shifted. Lawyers leaned back slightly in their chairs. The defense table tensed. Even Merrick, standing again at the wall like a beaten dog guarding the wrong door, stared as if seeing her for the first time. The arrogance in him didn't vanish. It shrank, retreated behind uncertainty. Ariana walked past the defense, past Merrick, past the row of clerks frozen in their seats. She stopped in front of the witness stand. Then she turned. "I'd like to speak to the court not as judge, not as plaintiff, not as anything you have a precedent for," she said, "but as the person you violated this morning." The room tightened. "I was detained without cause. I was touched without consent. I was humiliated physically and publicly in a federal building where I was assigned to uphold the law." Ariana's eyes swept across the courtroom. "And the man who did it is standing right there, still in uniform." Merrick straightened, jaw clenched. "You don't have the right to use this platform," one of the defense attorneys began. She turned her gaze toward him. "You will sit, and you will listen. I gave you space when this was about law, but now it is also about truth, and the law does not survive where truth is choked to death." The attorney said nothing. Ariana turned back to the gallery. "I want everyone in this courtroom to look at me. Not the robe, not the title. Me." She pulled back her hood, revealing the scalp still raw at the edges. The silver hairs, once neatly coiled, now lay somewhere in a trash bin beside a pair of gloves and an officer's smirk. This is what injustice looks like when it believes no one is watching. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply stood. And the silence she earned wasn't the kind that follows shock. It was reverence. It was realization. Ms. Bellamy, a voice rose from the gallery, soft, unsure. She turned slightly. A young woman stood, maybe early 20s, hair in a tight bun, glasses fogged from rushing. She held a notepad clutched to her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry," the girl said quietly. "I saw it. This morning. In the hallway." Ariana nodded once. Not to validate, not to forgive, but to acknowledge. "What's your name?" "Megan. Megan Whitlow. I'm an intern." "Thank you, Megan, for not pretending you didn't see." The girl's eyes shimmered. She sat down slowly. Ariana turned back toward the defense table. "There's a pattern in this courthouse. A long one. I've seen it in the records. Buried complaints, testimonies altered or misplaced, officers protected, victims dismissed. And I know this isn't the only courthouse where silence is safer than truth." She stepped toward the bench again, not to resume her seat, but to stand beside it, as if reminding the room that justice isn't always above. Sometimes it walks among them. "I asked to take this post because I believe this district deserved more than a temporary fill-in. I came without robe, without escort, without announcement, because justice should not depend on titles to be respected." She looked toward Merrick. "And because I wanted to see who you really are when you think no one is watching." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. A bailiff approached her quietly. "Your Honor, there's someone in chambers requesting an emergency audience from internal oversight." "Let them wait," she said without turning. "They'll have their moment, but mine's not done." She faced the gallery again. "I'm not going to recuse myself. If you believe what happened to me compromises my impartiality, then you may file your objection. I will provide the forms myself. But understand this." She took another step forward. "What happened this morning is not an exception. It is the rule hiding beneath our procedures. And if we allow it to remain unspoken, then justice does not bend. It shatters." Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. It landed. Slowly she turned, walked back up the steps, took her seat once more behind the bench. Then, only then, she reached for the gavel. This court is now, and will remain, in session. The afternoon light had shifted by the time the next witness took the stand. Outside, the sky was turning that bruised shade of gold gray that Baton Rouge wore before a storm. Inside, though, the storm had already landed. Ariana Bellamy watched as Fiona Carlisle, the assistant district investigator, stepped forward with a thick manila folder hugged to her chest. Her movements were careful, deliberate, but not hesitant. She wasn't here to guess. She was here to confirm what most already feared. "You're prepared to submit additional documentation into the record?" Ariana asked, her voice low, measured. "Yes, Your Honor," Fiona said, placing the folder before the clerk. "These are internal complaints, memos, and suppressed reports from the Charleston Federal Circuit, including incidents under Deputy Logan Merrick's supervision." A rustle swept the gallery. Ariana didn't blink. "Please summarize." Fiona opened her copy. "There are 12 formal complaints spanning the last 9 years. 8 involved excessive force, 3 involved racial profiling, 1 included sexual misconduct during search procedures." She paused. "All were dismissed without action. Why?" "Because they never made it past the supervisory desk." "Whose desk?" Ariana asked, though she already knew. Fiona looked down. "Judge Taryn Mahoney." The courtroom froze. It was a name that didn't just carry weight, it anchored reputations. Mahoney had retired only 6 months ago, his portrait still fresh on the wall. Ariana had clerked under him once. She had learned to draft orders under his careful eye, and now his legacy cracked at the center. "Do you have proof he suppressed the reports personally?" Fiona nodded. "Emails, handwritten memos. In one, he stated that pursuing complaints like these would undermine public faith in the judicial process." Ariana closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, they were not softer. They were sharper. "Submit it." The clerk filed it into the record. Ariana looked up at the gallery. Some were whispering. Others sat still, stunned. This wasn't just about one assault or even one man. It was the roots of a culture that had been allowed to fester because it was easier than pruning it. She turned to the defense. "Does the department wish to challenge the validity of these documents?" The lead defense attorney, a man with hair slicked back and posture too perfect, stood. Your Honor, given these new materials, we would like to raise the question of impartiality once again. Ariana folded her hands. On what grounds? He hesitated. These events now involve individuals from your own judicial history. You have personal associations that may affect your objectivity. My objectivity, she repeated, was not called into question when I was shaved and humiliated under this courthouse's roof. But now that your shield is cracking, you fear the scales may finally tip. The attorney bristled. I'm merely pointing out a conflict. And I am acknowledging it, which is why I've already requested a review panel from the circuit court. But let me be clear. Until that panel arrives, I remain the sitting judge, and this trial will proceed. Shoshone, there was no room left in her tone for rebuttal. She looked back toward Fiona. Anything else? Yes, Fiona said. There's someone waiting to speak. He's not on any formal list. But he used to work in this courthouse. As an internal officer, he claims he witnessed multiple cover-ups firsthand. Ariana nodded once. Bring him in. The courtroom doors opened. A tall man, older now, mid-50s, with a slight limp and a presence that didn't need a badge, stepped in. He wore a simple gray button-down, no tie, sleeves rolled. His name was Julius Creighton. He walked slowly, past the silent gallery, and took the stand. You were a compliance officer in this courthouse from 2004 to 2012? Yes, ma'am. Why did you leave? Because I stopped being able to sleep. Murmurs rippled. Ariana leaned forward. What did you witness? Pattern of suppression, reports written and reworded, complaints buried, victims redirected or discouraged. We were told to manage unrest, not resolve it. He cleared his throat. Merrick wasn't the only one, but he was consistent, relied on, encouraged. Encouraged by whom? Julius looked down at his hands. Mahoney, sometimes others, but mostly it wasn't direct. It was in what they didn't stop, what they allowed. Did you ever report it? I tried, got transferred, then pushed out. And why come forward now? Julius looked directly at her. Because I saw you walk into this room with your head bare and your back straight, and I realized I had no right to keep mine bowed. A quiet tear rolled down someone's cheek in the gallery. Ariana didn't look to see who. She nodded. Thank you, Mr. Creighton. You may step down. He did, slowly, with dignity. Ariana turned to the gallery. Today is not about retribution. It's about truth. And if that truth burns through legacies, then so be it. No name, no portrait, no years of service will excuse the harm done or the silence kept. She looked toward the door. Send for internal affairs. Tell them I'm ready. The room fell into a silence so complete it felt like a vacuum, as if every sound had been sucked out by the weight of what had just been revealed. Even the ceiling fans, still whirring above, seemed to fade beneath the moment. Ariana Bellamy sat straight, hands folded, her eyes fixed on the chamber door as two federal oversight agents stepped inside. Both wore dark suits, badges visible, not speaking. They nodded and she returned the gesture with a measured one of her own. This court will recess for 30 minutes, and she said, her voice clear, firm. Upon return, we will resume with internal testimony under federal review. She rose. No robe adjustment, no hesitation. As she exited through the chamber door, she left behind a room that no longer felt like a courtroom, but a stage where silence had finally been challenged. In her chambers, Ariana paced. The burn of the clippers still tingled on her scalp, a phantom echo of violation. But it no longer felt like shame. It felt like a scar she had claimed. A knock. Her clerk peeked in. There's someone who asked to speak with you, privately. Ariana's brows furrowed. Who? She says her name is Erin Kessler. She's not with the case, but she was in the gallery. Said she recognized Merrick. From years ago. Ariana nodded. Send her in. A woman in her early 30s entered, eyes hollow but determined. She held a folded sheet of paper, creased from being clenched too tightly for too long. I didn't know who to tell, she said. Not until I saw what they did to you. Ariana gestured toward the chair across from her. Sit. Speak freely. I was 19, Erin began. First time I'd ever been in a courthouse. I was just picking up forms for my brother's appeal. I went through that same security room. Her voice thinned. Merrick told me my belt triggered the alarm. He said he needed to inspect for contraband. He made me stand with my arms out. Then he reached under my shirt. She didn't cry. Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. I froze. I didn't even know I could say no. Ariana's jaw tightened. Did you report it? Aaron gave a bitter laugh. To who? I told the front desk. They said I must have misunderstood, that maybe I was nervous and exaggerated it. I never came back. Ariana reached for a pad. Would you be willing to give a sworn statement? I will, now. Aaron paused. I wanted you to know. You standing up there? I never thought I'd see someone like him held accountable. You just helped make sure he will be. When Ariana returned to the bench, the gallery was packed. Reporters had filed in. Some familiar faces from D.C., others local. The front row now held not just attorneys and officials, but victims. Quiet, steady, waiting. She tapped the gavel. Proceedings are resumed. A new witness was called. Louis Bryant, early 60s, former veteran. He walked slowly, but his voice was clear. I was arrested here in 2011. I raised my voice when my daughter's case was dismissed. Merrick grabbed me, slammed me into the wall. He lifted his shirt, 2 ribs visibly out of alignment. I filed a complaint, right there at the desk. The report said I tripped. They told me to stop making noise. So I did. He looked at Ariana. But not today. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. As he returned to his seat, Ariana scanned the room. Anyone else? A pause, then one hand rose, then 2, then 5. Men and women, some elderly, some barely adults, stood. One by one, they shared what Merrick had done, what others had enabled. Each voice chipped away at the wall of impunity, layer by layer. And for once, no one interrupted them. Not a defense objection, not a procedural stall, just testimony and silence. Their silence, but not hers. Ariana stood. I've sat behind this bench for years, she said. I've worn the robe, followed protocol, spoken in tones deemed appropriate, but too often I stayed silent when I should have thundered. She pulled off the robe, folded it, laid it gently across the chair, then faced the room, vulnerable, stripped, but unshaken. Today I speak plainly. What happened to me should never happen to anyone. What happened to all of you should never have been buried. This courthouse, this system is ours to fix, and I will. She lifted a document. I am submitting the Monroe Mandate, a federal resolution requiring anti-bias training, independent screening oversight, and immediate investigation of all prior complaints within this circuit. She held it up. I will take this to the circuit, to the judiciary, to the Senate if I must. The gallery stood, not in applause, but in solidarity. Merrick was brought in last. No uniform, no badge. Just handcuffs and the hollow look of a man who had mistaken silence for safety too long. Ariana faced him with no hatred, just fire. Mr. Merrick, she said, for abuse of power, for civil rights violations, and for obstruction, this court sentences you to the maximum penalties under federal law. 6 years, then 5 more, and another for every voice he tried to silence. In the chambers that evening, the robe still hung, undisturbed. Ariana stood before it, not staring with reverence, but with clarity. Her clerk entered. They're still outside, reporters, protesters, some just watching. Ariana smiled faintly. Let them. She turned back to the mirror. Her reflection met her, no longer broken. This is who I am now. No, this is who I've always been. Now the world knows it too. It was nearly dusk when the courthouse emptied for the day. The final echo of shoes on marble faded, replaced by the hum of overhead lights and the occasional groan of old wood settling into silence. But Ariana Bellamy remained. She sat alone in her chambers, the file on her desk thick, its corners worn from hands more nervous than hers. Inside were names, some whispered, some feared, all connected by a silence that had been broken too late for some and just in time for others. She turned a page and paused. The name at the top wasn't Merrick. It was Judge Graham Atwood, a retired senior judge from the Charleston Appellate Circuit, revered, decorated, untouchable. She flipped to the second page. A complaint, filed under seal, year 2013, Victim, Sadie Corwin, a bailiff, barely out of training, who had filed an internal report alleging that Judge Atwood had instructed her to dismiss minor incidents involving officers to preserve the dignity of the court. But she hadn't dismissed them. She'd written them down, and someone had buried them. Ariana stood abruptly. She crossed the room and opened the locked drawer beneath her bookshelf. Inside were the sealed envelopes she'd requested over the last month, each one containing pieces of something that, when laid together, resembled a map of complicity. And at the center now was Atwood. A knock broke her thoughts. It was her clerk. "There's someone asking to speak to you. Not press. He says it's personal." "Name?" "Julius Creighton." Ariana's pulse skipped, but she nodded. Julius stepped in, this time without the hesitant posture. He looked like a man who had come not to confess, but to finish what he started. "I need to tell you something that never made it into any file," he said. "About Atwood?" He nodded slowly. "In 2010, I overheard a meeting. Atwood, Merrick, two other judges. They were reviewing what they called problem reports, cases that could cause media noise. You have documentation?" "I have a recording." Ariana stared. "I didn't plan to record them. The recorder was part of my training kit. I forgot to turn it off." "Do you still have it?" "I made copies. I was scared, but I kept them." Ariana exhaled sharply. "Bring them to the oversight team. Today." "I will, but I wanted to tell you first." "Why?" "Because one of the voices on that tape," he said, voice tightening, "is Mahoney's." Ariana froze. Her mentor, the man whose signature had paved her way into the judiciary, the one who had once told her, "You'll be the future of this court." Now he was part of its past, its rotted, protected, echoing past. By morning, the courthouse felt different. Not empty, but exposed. More people walked through its doors not with fear, but with purpose. And on the third floor, internal affairs had taken over a small room that once served as a jury lounge. Inside, folders were open, whiteboards filled, and Ariana sat before them, no longer a judge among judges, but a witness to a system she had upheld, and now had to help dismantle. "Miss Bellamy," one agent said, "we verified the recording. The voices are clear, the content deeply concerning." "What's the chain of command?" "Atwood ran the culture, Mahoney enforced it, Merrick carried it out. But there are more." "Will you recommend charges?" "Yes, against all of them." "And the others who remain silent?" The agent paused. "That's where it gets political." "I don't care about political," Ariana said. "I care about principled." He nodded. "We'll begin with Atwood. He's living in a private estate outside Savannah." Not for long," she replied. Later that afternoon, the courtroom was called back into session. Not for trial, but for formal notice. Ariana stepped behind the bench, not in her robe, but in a black suit. Clean, plain, unmistakable. She looked out at the gallery, now filled with not just victims, not just journalists, but young law students, community leaders, and officers from other precincts who came to witness a turning tide. "This court recognizes the formal findings of the Federal Oversight Board," she announced. "Judge Graham Atwood has been referred for criminal investigation, so have former judges connected to his tenure. Internal compliance officers who suppressed reports have been placed under immediate review." A hand rose in the gallery. "Your Honor, does this mean the courthouse will be purged?" "No," Ariana said. "It means it will be rebuilt. From truth." She turned to the prosecution table. "And before we move on to sentencing, I have one final request." She gestured. From the side door, a woman entered. Sadie Corwin, older now but strong. She stepped to the front, stood beside Ariana, and faced the room. "You once believed me," Ariana told her quietly. Sadie nodded. "And now the court does too." Sadie turned to the crowd. "I stayed silent because I thought I had no power. But silence is not safety, it's surrender." She stepped back. The room stood with her. That evening, as Ariana left the courthouse, she walked past a group of teenage girls clustered near the steps. One wore a Monroe Mandate t-shirt. Another held a notebook. "Miss Bellamy," one called out. "What made you keep going?" Ariana paused, then answered honestly. Because no one else did. And she kept walking, into the dusk, into the next fight, into history. The courthouse was quiet again, but it wasn't the suffocating quiet of complicity or fear. It was the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the wreckage has settled and truth hangs in the air like the scent of rain-soaked earth. Ariana Bellamy stepped into the main courtroom as the sun peeked through high windows, casting narrow beams that cut across the benches in the empty jury box. It was early, too early for press, too early for the public, but she needed this moment, this silence. She took her seat, not behind the bench, but on the gallery's front row. A symbolic inversion. Today, she wasn't just the judge. She was the listener, because justice wasn't just rendered in verdicts. Sometimes it lived in the space where voices were finally allowed to echo. The door opened. One by one, they entered. Not defendants, not officers, not lawyers, but voices. Sadie Corwin returned first. No longer just the footnote to a suppressed report, but the woman whose memory had pulled a lie into light. She brought a box with her, files she'd copied from her own private records. Names, notes, missed chances. She placed it carefully on the table and nodded. Next came Erin Kessler, nervous but firm, with her affidavit folded in her hand like armor. Then Lewis Bryant, walking with a slow, steady limp. Then others. Some Ariana knew, others she didn't. Some had testified, others hadn't, but all had returned. Because she had. A clerk stepped in and whispered, "They're ready." Ariana rose and walked to the bench, not in robe, not in armor, but in full clarity. "This session is not a trial," she said, addressing the courtroom, which was now slowly filling with law students, community organizers, and a few officers seated apart, attentive. "This is a public declaration of record," she gestured to the box. "These are statements, not of accusation, but of remembrance. And if justice means anything, it must begin with memory." She nodded to the clerk, who called the first name, Howard Briggs, mid-40s, foreman, grieving father. He stood with shaking hands, held a photo of his son, eyes bright, smile crooked. "They told me my boy resisted," he said. "Said he flailed like he was asking for it. But I saw the footage. He stood there. Didn't even raise a hand." He paused. "The man who crushed his throat still wears a badge." No outburst followed. No applause, just the silence that swells around truth. Next, Megan the intern took the stand. Her voice trembled, but her chin didn't drop. "I saw what Merrick did to Judge Bellamy. I didn't say anything. I wanted to. But I froze. I thought maybe I imagined it. That's what power does. It makes you doubt your own eyes." She looked straight at Ariana. "Thank you for not freezing." Ariana didn't speak. She didn't need to. She let the silence carry it. That was the sound of justice, too. The hours passed like a slow unraveling. Each speaker brought something, a name, a memory, a wound, but also a will to speak it aloud. By late morning, the press had arrived. Cameras stood behind velvet ropes. One news anchor whispered into her mic, "This may be the most unprecedented form of judicial reckoning in recent memory." But Ariana didn't care for sound bites. She cared for sound, not volume, but truth. At noon, she stood once more. "This session will recess," she said, "but not close." She turned to the clerk. "Schedule the next open court for public statements. Continue until the last voice is heard." There was a murmur, then applause. Not for her, for themselves. Later that day, she was invited to speak at Howard University's law school. She hadn't prepared a speech. She brought only herself. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, alumni, visitors. A young woman stood during Q&A, her hair braided tight, eyes fierce. "How do you stay calm when people hate you?" Ariana thought. "Calm isn't quiet. Calm is choosing not to let their hate decide your voice." Another student, barely audible, asked, "Did you ever want to quit?" Ariana smiled gently. "Every day, and every day I chose not to." Outside, a student caught her arm. "Do you still believe in the system?" She paused. "I don't believe in what the system was." A breath. "But I believe in what it can become, and I believe in people like you asking that question. That's how it changes." The student nodded, eyes welling. "Then I'll keep asking." Ariana squeezed her shoulder. Good. That night, she sat alone in her chambers. The courtroom was empty. The robe was on the hook. The bench was still. And then came a knock. It was Nain. Casual, smiling, a brown paper bag in hand. I brought Ty, she said. Ariana looked up. God, yes. They sat cross-legged on the floor between law books and sealed depositions. You know, Nan said between bites, you could rock that bare scalp every damn day. Ariana smirked. You think? I know. You don't need a robe to make people listen. A beat. Ariana stared at her reflection in the glass of a framed commendation. You're right. You've always known. They clinked chopsticks. Outside, the courthouse was lit by street lamps. Inside, it was full of noise. The quiet kind. The kind that lingers when people finally feel heard. They called it a hearing, but what it felt like was a reckoning. That morning, as Ariana Bellamy approached the courthouse for the final statement on federal oversight findings, the streets around it weren't just occupied. They were transformed. Where once stood silence and avoidance, now stood hundreds, young and old, families and students, veterans and first-time voters, black, brown, white. Some held signs, some just held hands. And in the center of it all, Ariana. No robe, no escort, just her. Each step she took up those stone steps echoed in a hush that rippled through the crowd. And then the chant began. Say her name, Ariana Bellamy. Say his name, Louis Bryant. Say their names, all of them. She didn't look away. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. She was already leading, by standing. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with something raw. Reporters whispered in clipped tones. Law students scribbled into notebooks. Officers sat, backs straight, but eyes lowered. And the gallery. It was standing room only. The weight of the moment was not in the chaos. It was in the fact that everyone had finally shut up and started listening. Ariana walked to the bench and did not sit. She placed a single folder at the center of the table. The label read, Oversight Findings, Closed Cases Reopened. I stand before you not with a ruling, she said, voice unwavering, but with remembrance. She opened the folder slowly. For decades, names were filed away. Some misspelled, some marked unsubstantiated, some never entered at all. Her eyes scanned the crowd. But a name is never just ink. She looked down. Fiona Carlisle, detained without cause, assaulted during transport, case sealed in 2009. Malcolm Hensley, retired officer, terminated for reporting abuse, record redacted. Aaron Kessler, Sadie Corwin, Julius Creighton. Each name landed like a drumbeat, soft but undeniable. Ariana closed the folder. This is what a system buries. She lifted her gaze again. And this, she tapped the folder, is what we will dig up. The next voice belonged to a woman from the Department of Justice, sent to deliver federal response. We acknowledge the failures of oversight, we apologize for the institutional silence, and we affirm Judge Bellamy's findings as foundation for nationwide policy review. A pause. Today, with this court's records, we commit to retraining, rescreening, and revisiting over 3,000 misconduct complaints previously dismissed across multiple districts. She turned to Ariana. Your name, your case, was a spark, but your conduct, that's the standard now. Ariana didn't blink. She didn't smile. She nodded once, and that was enough. After the hearing, the crowd outside didn't disperse. They waited, not for drama, but for her. So Ariana stepped out, not to podium, not to cameras, but to people. A girl, maybe 12, approached her. Her voice was so small it nearly drowned in the noise. Judge Bellamy, can I ask something? Ariana knelt. Of course. Did it hurt when they cut your hair? A pause. Yes, but not the way you think. The girl looked puzzled. It hurt, Ariana continued, because I thought, for a second, that they'd taken something from me. And did they? No, she said gently. They just reminded me who I was and what they couldn't touch. That night, Ariana returned home to find a letter in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy, A courtroom dated 1965. At the bench, a black woman in a plain suit. Behind her, a crowd of men in uniforms, some looking angry, some defeated. The caption, Judge Naomi Trenton, Fifth Circuit Court, 1965. On the back, in careful script, they tried to silence her too. She didn't let them. Now neither have you. Ariana traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. She hadn't known Naomi Trenton. The name was barely mentioned in legal textbooks, but now she would make sure it was. A month later, the courthouse hallways no longer echoed with empty fear. They pulsed with presence. Students walked the marble floors for tours, not arraignments. Victims entered not for judgment, but for justice. Clerks who once whispered now spoke plainly. Officers no longer smirked behind security desks. They stood straighter, not from dominance, but from awareness. And Ariana? She sat behind the bench once again. The robe returned, but she wore it differently now, like a banner, not a shield. And when she spoke, she did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. Then came the question, at a press event, post-verdict, low-voiced, casual, but deliberate. Do you think they respect you now? Ariana took her time. I don't work for their respect, she said. I work for justice. And justice doesn't need applause. It needs proof. On her final day in that courtroom before taking a seat on the Federal Advisory Board for Judicial Ethics, Ariana left something behind. It wasn't her robe. It wasn't a plaque. It was a nameplate, but not hers. She had it made from dark wood, engraved in silver leaf. It read, Naomi Trenton, never silenced. She placed it on the bench. No explanation, no announcement, just presence. Because justice wasn't a speech, or a title, or a press conference. Justice was continuity, a name carried forward, a truth remembered, a silence broken. There was no press conference, no farewell banner, no parade down the courthouse steps. Just morning, a steady golden morning where Ariana Bellamy stood in her kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped ceramic mug, the same one she used her first year on the bench. The handle had a faint crack. She liked it that way, imperfect, but enduring. Outside, birds stirred the air over Charleston's historic district, their wings slicing the light with brief shadows. The city hadn't changed, but how it listened had. She took a sip. The warmth hit her throat, settled deep, and then the knock came. She knew who it was before she opened the door. Nyan, holding a small manila envelope. No return label again, she said, raising a brow. Your secret admirers are really committed. Ariana took it. I'm not sure they're fans. Anand grinned. You made people uncomfortable. That's proof you did it right. Inside the envelope was a list. Names, addresses, handwritten in uneven script. Some names were crossed out with soft pencil. Next to them, one word repeated over and over. Gone. Ariana sat down. There were 27 names. 27 former courthouse employees, officers, defendants, clerks. Some who had testified, some who never got the chance. At the bottom of the list was a note. They weren't all seen, but they saw everything. She stared at it for a long time. Then quietly, she began making calls. Over the following weeks, she traveled, not for work, not for cameras, but for closure. She visited the daughter of Lewis Bryant, who ran a modest diner off Route 17. The girl, now in her 30s, hugged Ariana so tightly she nearly lost her breath. He always thought he was invisible, she whispered. Now I get letters from law students saying he changed their lives. Ariana wrote his name in her pocket journal, underlined it once. She visited the nephew of Julius Creighton, who had passed the week before she could return. He had saved newspaper clippings, court records, a voice recording Ariana had never heard before. In it, Julius said softly, If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get to say it myself, but I saw her stand, and I stood with her, even if only for a while. That's enough. She played it twice. The second time, she cried. Back in Charleston, the courthouse's energy had shifted entirely. The new judge, a young Latina from New Mexico, kept Ariana's old chambers. She asked for Ariana's blessing before moving in. Ariana brought her a plant, low maintenance, hard to kill. Judging is quiet work, she told her. Don't expect applause. The woman smiled. I don't want applause. I want change. You'll fit right in. At a university event, Ariana gave a talk on legacy and truth. A student asked, "What was the moment you knew something had changed?" She paused and then answered, "When I stopped hearing only silence in these halls and started hearing echoes." Echoes, not of pain, not of injustice, but of voices, of names, of people finally being said out loud. She still walked past the courthouse some mornings, mostly out of habit. One day, a small girl stood outside holding her grandmother's hand. The grandmother whispered something, then pointed at Ariana. The girl asked, "Is she the one from the book?" Ariana raised an eyebrow. "What book?" The grandmother pulled a paperback from her bag. It was titled, "She Spoke in Silence, The Story of Ariana Bellamy." Ariana chuckled. "Well," she said, crouching to meet the girl's eyes, "what did the book say I did?" The girl scrunched her nose. "It said you didn't let them tell you who you were." Ariana blinked. "That's not bad. Are you really a judge?" "I was. Why aren't you now?" She stood slowly. "Because I needed to make space for others, like the woman behind that bench now. And one day, maybe you." The girl beamed. "Can I be a judge?" "You already asked the right questions. That's how it starts." That night, Nahin joined her for dinner. They sat under dim lights, soft music playing from an old vinyl. They didn't talk about court, or politics, or the weight of old scars. They just existed, alive, unbroken, still laughing. Ariana took Nahin's hand. "I used to think the robe was what made them listen." Nahin shook her head. "They listened because you made them uncomfortable with the truth." Ariana smiled. "The robe's just cloth. The truth, that's steel." On the day of her final federal ethics hearing, Ariana wore navy, not black. No gavel, no entourage. She walked in with her head high, no script in hand. She addressed the panel. "My name has been recorded, questioned, praised, and vilified, but today I offer it with no defense, only purpose." She laid a single photograph before them. Naomi Trenton, 1965. She looked each of them in the eye. "She carried the truth before me. I carried it for a time. And now I pass it forward, not to another name, but to a movement, one that no longer asks permission to be heard." There was no applause, just quiet, the good kind. Later that month, a new judicial training video began circulating across the country. Its title was simple, "The Integrity Standard." The first frame? A quote, "Justice is not the sound of a gavel, it's the echo of a name once buried, now spoken without fear." Judge Ariana Bellamy. Back in Charleston, inside Courtroom B, a new wooden plaque was installed behind the bench. It read, "This courtroom operates under the Bellamy Standard. Zero tolerance for abuse. Zero tolerance for silence. Every name matters." She never asked for monuments. She asked for memory. And she got it. Not in marble, but in murmurs. In first-year law students citing her ruling. In children who no longer feared uniforms. In clerks who spoke up. In judges who listened more than they ruled. And in a name, once carved into shame, now echoed with strength. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. What emotions did it stir in you? Did it shock you, move you, or maybe make you see justice in a new light? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button, share the video with someone who needs to hear it, and stay tuned. More stories are coming. Until next time, take care.